Welcome back, everyone. Happy New Year. Welcome back to Complex Chronic Illness Support for 2023. I am Tracy Larson. I am the Waikato Health and Wellness Facilitator, and our February topic this month is the process of change. There is no doubt about it. Change is inevitable in and all through life. Without change, it is said that there can be no evolution. Some change is welcomed, it's purposefully and intentionally created. However, some change is not wanted, and contracting a chronic health condition is definitely no exception. Anyone who is living with chronic illness faces much change in functioning levels, change in financial status, possibly even some relationship statuses, or at the least, change in relationship roles. Change in this regard comes with a loss and grief process. But once you've settled into a new life of chronic illness and you've made the required adjustments to manage day to day, and you've become a little more accepting of where you're at, you may now find yourself in the space of considering what further changes you can undertake to manage your way out of it towards recovery, or at the least, to improve your sense of well-being whilst living with it. To make progress towards wellness, one needs to review their lifestyle habits and change any energy depleting patterns and habits that cause a negative impact on health. All recoveries will tell you that they created improvement in their well-being by doing something. That something may be making changes with their diet, applying pacing strategies, creating good sleep hygiene practices, or using a weekly planner to create good daily routines. Whatever the pathway or pathways, it requires focused attention to create the change. A change in daily activities from what you were doing prior to onset of illness, a change in lifestyle habits, a change in how you respond to your environment as well. And often, a change in mindset and attitude is required too. The tricky thing with change that creates lasting improvement is making the new habit, lifestyle, or approach to well-being permanent. How often have you made some changes in your life, got great results, only to slip back to your old ways of being 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down the track? I can put my hand up to that too. I've lost count of the times I've tried to create healthy lifestyle changes, usually around weight management, only to revert back to my old ways. Having said that though, it has always been some change, some small little piece that I have managed to change permanently. So why is lasting change so difficult? One reason is because change usually involves us having to give up something that we love, like chocolate and bread for weight loss, gluten-laden products or dairy to control gastro issues, smoking and alcohol for health, or coffee to settle anxiety and chronic stress. Another explanation is that habits don't require us to think about them and thus don't require a cognitive load. Focused thinking and making decisions is mentally tiring for us and depletes our willpower. New habits mean we have to think consciously about activities that we were previously done without thinking. In other words, focused thinking takes effort and energy, something our ME community don't have a lot of. Change can therefore initiate a sense of fear and anxiety because it represents difficulty. It represents effort and discomfort, and that we have to reside in a space of uncertainty, in the unknown, for an unspecified period of time. We resist uncertainty. Our brains prefer predictability and would choose a negative outcome over an uncertain one any day. This is why we often find ourselves sitting in a space of contentment where we adapt to a percentage of discomfort and unhappiness in our lives because it's simply just what we know and what we're comfortable with. Hey, but the wonderful thing is that our mind is flexible and adaptive and it can be trained to thrive in change. So the paradox is that although we are fearful of the uncertainty and discomfort that change brings, humans have actually evolved since the beginning of time. So that means that you and me, we have the skills and the ability to adapt and change. So doesn't that invite a wonderful sense of hope? Yes, we can do this. So you're now feeling a little motivated to create some change, but where to start? Today, we will first look at change from a behavioural perspective, where I will offer some practical ideas for you to consider. However, my research into this topic has led me to understand that there's also an emotional process that happens in conjunction with a behavioural one. And it's probably most likely the emotional process that's going to cause any sense of failure to occur and pull the rug out from under our feet. So we'll explore this concept also. So here we have the trans-theoretical model of behavioural change, and we will now go through each of these stages and discuss them separately. So first up is pre-contemplation. This is where you're not really aware that there are changes that are needed and you're not aware of any benefits of changes. And if you have attempted change in the past, you might be also still feeling a bit demoralised by any failure. And so you're sitting back in this space of, oh, no, not going to make any changes. Next up is contemplation, where you're starting to begin to understand that some change is needed, but you're not ready for action yet. But you may be starting to consider some of your previous attempts and therefore starting to become aware of, there are some pros and cons that you need to consider, and you might be thinking about the ability, your readiness for the ability to change, and identifying some barriers to overcome as well. So next up is the preparation stage. This is when you draw up your plans around the changes that you want to make, but you're not quite ready to take action on the intention yet. Motivation is growing, and that is usually grows by understanding your why for the need for change. It is at this stage it is important to know your why and understand your goal. It is your why that will drive your motivation. Why are you wanting to create this change? What is the purpose? What do you aim to achieve? And it's really important to be specific and realistic within the scope of your current level of ability and energy envelope. For ME, chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, recovery can look very different for everyone. So for some, it may be possible to return to part-time work, and that might be achievable. So your why may be supporting yourself financially. For others, returning to work may not be realistic at all. So your why may be to improve your daily functioning levels so you can cook a consistent meal each night, perhaps. Your goal, therefore, may be to move up the activity scale by 5% or 3% or even just 1% at a time. I think it's important to remember that even the most babyest and smallest things that you can do each day is still important and still forward movement. For others, it may be just to focus on pacing. Consider what you have tried in the past. What has worked? What hasn't? What has been your barriers in the past? Engaging with professional support for any trauma-based issues that may be barriers is quite important as well. So when contemplating change, forward planning is essential, especially for when you reach the relapse stage, which we will talk about in a moment. How will you support yourself when you hit a pothole? How do you climb back on the horse? At this preparation stage, it is important to kit out your toolkit. What tools, strategies, and techniques will you follow? Have you got your weekly planner on your wall to support your planning, pacing, and resting routines? Have you ordered the devices and equipment you need? Have you downloaded the breathing, mindfulness, and meditation apps that you will use? So next up is action. You're ready to take some actions and you are starting to adopt new behaviours. Action takes energy. Energy, many of our ME and fibro community find difficult to summons. So it is important to break down your process into baby steps. If too big, it can be too daunting before you've even started. So I can't stress enough, baby steps and one step at a time. You may be ready to bounce your boundaries and try to increase your movement. So your first goal might be to walk to your letterbox and back. Start once and just gauge what your post-exertion malaise does. If that's good, then you might be able to do that 3 times a week and then slowly build up so you can do it every day. Once you sort of get to that point, then it might be your next expanding out could be to the first lamppost and back. So this is an example of what I mean by baby steps. Or you might want to perhaps change your sleep hygiene, and that could be where your focus is to start with. So turning off all electronics before an hour before bed each night might be your first and only step for several weeks. If you want to adjust your day-night sleep patterns, maybe going to bed 15 minutes earlier each night and waking up 15 minutes earlier each day might be the only thing you do for the first 3 months before you create another step. So do not change everything at once, but one thing at a time. If trialing new supplements, start one at a time and trial that for 3 to 4 weeks to determine its effectiveness before adding a new one into your regime. Change requires repetition and routine. Repetition, 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 routine, routine, routine to make new habits. When we learn something new, we form new neural pathways in the brain. Each new lesson has the potential to connect new neurons and change our brain's default mode of operation. And this is called neuroplasticity. Oh, I didn't say that very well. It's a bit of a tongue twister. Neuroplasticity, which is the capacity for our brain cells to change in response to our behavior, which can help us more thoughtfully engage in activities that will contribute to our well-being no matter what our age. It is suggested that intention, specific attention, repetition and intensity, and time are key components required for neural pathways to develop to support the change process. So patience is required. Repetition should be shorter bouts of intense repetition to create new connections, and that a one and done approach is not enough. I love this picture. It really clearly demonstrates the importance of baby, baby, baby steps and how much further you can actually get than if you create 2 bigger steps, because look, 2 bigger steps will just set you up from failure right from the start. So next up, we have maintenance, and this is where new behaviours have replaced old behaviours and all is going really well. Maintenance is the stage in which people have made and sustained specific behavioural change for quite some time, typically up to 6 months. Could be 12 months, could be 18 months in some of my cases too. While they are still working to prevent relapse, they do not apply the change process quite as frequently as people do who are in action. Individuals in the maintenance stage have developed strategies to avoid temptation and are increasingly more confident that they can contribute to their changes. Confidence can be what trips you up here though, so some caution is needed to be stated here. It will be here that the person who has given up smoking may be tempted to have a little sneaky puff and think that they can get away with it, and probably do for a few weeks or for a few months. But they inevitably are on that slippery slope to relapse. So just a word of caution there that don't get cocky and confident and think you can have a sneaky puff, or you can have that little chocolate bar, or you can sneak back into some of those old habits, because that will be where you will get on that slippery slope. So next is relapse. Now, this is not the end of change, but this is just a blip in the road, just a pothole at the time. And this is a great opportunity to review and adjust your approach and tweak your plans. The relapse stage is often when we slide back into old habits, and it is suggested that the cause of relapse can be attributed to the brain determining that the new neural pathway you are trying to create is taking too much energy. So for the sake of efficiency and energy preservation, it is better to continue to use the old neural pathway. This will be evident when a stress comes into your life or you get really busy and there's an extra cognitive load, making you feel mentally burdened and you just don't have the energy to attend to the stressful event or the busyness in life and maintaining that new habit. So we revert to autopilot, which is when the old habit comes marching straight back into action. The brain is also resisting the discomfort and the unpredictability, as previously mentioned. So the quickest way to end the discomfort is to quit and go back to the way you did before things were, before change was introduced. And it's about now that you're starting to think, well, the old ways of being weren't really that bad after all. The relapse stage is an important and very normal stage of change, and I really want to emphasize that this is really normal and it's a really important stage, especially for personal growth. This is really where great personal growth can happen. It is also, though, and another word of warning, that you have to be really resilient against that sense of hopelessness and failure. This is where we will beat ourselves up. And this is where self-criticism will kick in. Mindfulness strategies are helpful here, so I want to suggest this because they will help you to acknowledge the disappointment and your feelings that surround the event. Acknowledgement enables you to release instead of repress these feelings. And once you've released the feelings, it frees up that mental space so you can refocus. It can help you shift from that guilt, shame, and hopelessness and reapproach your plan more positively. A great way to do this is to consider yourself a scientist and think of your changes as experiments and have an attitude of openness and curiosity and using the new knowledge that you've since gained to build upon your previous plans. This can help you to support resilience. So view yourself as a scientist can help take away the emotion so you can mentally focus on the change. So plan for relapse. It is normal. Refocus, adjust your schedule, and keep going. So now let's look at the emotional cycle of change. Without understanding this, success will be more difficult to achieve. And I really want to note here that whatever the change you're undertaking, it will be an emotional ride. It is suggested that you know this ride and that you embrace this ride and use the knowledge to increase the chance of healthy change. Right, the first point on this cycle is uninformed optimism. Most exciting stage where you are imagining all the benefits of the change without experiencing any of the reality of the effort. You see all the benefits of the change and none of the downside. This stage doesn't last long before change stage 2 kicks in, which is uninformed pessimism. This is when you very quickly learn the reality of what it takes to change. Your mood drops and the positive emotions quickly shift to negative emotional states. Here, the benefits don't seem as real, important, or immediate, and the cost of change becomes very apparent. And this is where people question if the change is even really worth it. And you start to look for reasons to abandon the effort. Oh my goodness, I can relate to this. I've just tried to start a exercise program myself. And within the first 4 days, I was that sore because I went too hard and too fast because I took too big a step and not lots of little baby steps. And I very quickly went, oh no, and abandoned ship. And I'm back to my preparation stage and planning stage. Okay, now we hit the pit of despair. Sorry to be so gloomy, but this is a really important part of the process. This is when relapse is likely to happen, but not always. But it's the lowest point in the emotional cycle, and it's the entry into the valley of despair. This is where reality really bites. The pain of change is felt, and the benefits seem far, far away and, quite frankly, quite unimportant. The emotional reaction can often make us feel like a failure, and we can give up at this point. This is where that real beating up of ourselves can happen. This is when the old patterns of conditioning created in childhood and from historical traumas will surface. Your subconscious will start to work against you, and the beliefs you hold about yourself in your head will become quite evident with your self talk. So it's important to have a bit of a listen to your self talk at this point and explore it, as this will give you hints about any of those historical traumas that may be barriers to lasting change, that may require some professional support to help you work through. What can result here is that maybe your thinking starts to be that, wow, it's just easier to live the way you always have. The effort is too much, and you resign yourself to the fact that life will always look like this now. And this is when we can fall into that space of low mood and depression as we bounce between that desire and that longing for the new and what could be, and a sense of despairing resignation for remaining in the unknown and that safe space of same old, same old. So it is suggested that this is a very normal pathway to the change process, as so expected. Understand it, and when it happens, you'll be far more likely to be able to roll through this process with much better success. Knowledge is power, and it doesn't change the experience, but it will help you understand what is happening and therefore reduce any sense of anxiety and doubt that you may experience. Self-compassion is super, super important here. Self-compassion and treating yourself kindly when we fail is far more effective than criticism. Naming and acknowledging your feelings is helpful here because, as I said before, it helps you to shift that focus from self-criticism to self-compassion. And if you're needing some strategies to help you with this, be sure to have a look at our website. We have got a huge raft of resources on lots of healing modalities to support self-compassion, such as breathing, mindfulness, and restorative movement. Phew! You're outside the other side of a pit of despair, and you are now sitting in hopeful realism. This is a space where you are, after processing the emotional content and after reviewing your plans, hopeful realism becomes present. This is the possibility of success. The possibility of success starts to increase again, and you're back in that positive emotional zone. You've finished beating yourself up. You've applied some self compassion strategies, and you're back in that positive emotional zone. The benefits of your actions are starting to bear fruit, and the cost of change is starting to feel worth it. The key here is to not stop, but just to keep going. And then lastly, informed optimism. Success and fulfillment at last. Woohoo! The benefits of your new behaviours are now fully experienced, and the cost of change is now perceived as being worth it. And the actions that were once uncomfortable and difficult are now more like second nature and more routine. Wow, I feel like I've just taken you through this big journey of change, looking at the behavioural perspective as well as this emotional perspective, which I think overlay each other really well. And I can really talk to this quite a lot at the moment because I myself has been undertaking a change process probably for the last 2 years, and I hit relapse about sort of towards the end of November. I was really starting to that maintenance. I was getting a little bit cocky, and I was starting to allow little things to sort of happen, sneak back in, and yeah, hit relapse about end of November. And I've just sort of been through that pit of despair. So I feel like I'm at that hopeful realism stage again now and starting to feel a lot more positive, and I'm back at that contemplation and planning stage and dipping my toe occasionally back into the action stage. And every now and then going, oh yeah, this is fun, but oh no, I just still feel like I still quite enjoy that piece of bread at lunchtime, or I'm still sort of in the habit of having a little chocolate after dinner. So still yet to give up some of those habits, but yeah, it's been really hugely interesting, and so I hope that the little bits of how to think about this information I'm sharing today and applying some real life sort of ideas in with it, I hope have helped you grasp these concepts. So I think let's just have a look at some of the key points that we raised today, especially in light of or in regards to ME, chronic fatigue, fibro world, because I think it's really important to remember that, yeah, change takes more energy and cognitive load to create those new habits, which you have to be really mindful of when you haven't got a lot of energy to start with. So to navigate the change process, it is really important to prioritize your activities and to take in some extra rest at those beginning stages, especially the beginning stages of the action phase, until that new habit becomes more natural in practice. And using pacing strategies, especially the strategy of switching between tasks, use switching between old habits and new habits can be a good way to start in the action as well in the early stages. Because habits take little energy, because there's no emotion attached to habits, they do take little energy, so they're often performed in autopilot. So having parts of the day where small parts of the day where you're applying the new habit, but then having parts of the day when you're not having to apply and use that energy to have to still do your old habits, or for the habits that don't need changing or not changing yet anyway. Because remember, you're doing small baby steps and you're only doing one change at a time. So hopefully that is switching tasks as a way to sort of use pacing strategies to help. Take small bite-sized moments throughout the day to attend to your new habits. Sorry, I'm just catching up on my notes. This supports the concepts of baby habits, baby steps, and to take one change at a time. And when the new habit is formed, the extra effort and cognitive load will reduce, freeing up the energy and time to attend to another change. But just be mindful here that when a sudden stressful event or extra busyness happens in your day, or perhaps Christmas crops up, or there's a holiday, or there's a wedding cropping up, or there's a special event going on, that just remember that that extra cognitive load and the mental burden that is felt around that time, those are the danger moments when old habits can start to sneak in, because remember, they don't take much cognitive load or cognitive effort, so they will sneak in. So just be really careful and mindful around those times. So I think we can all agree that change is hard. Yes, it is hard, and that it is important to expect an emotional roller coaster, and that relapse is inevitable. So be kind and be self-compassionate to yourself. Really important. And I think it's human nature to expect that the process of change is linear, especially when we're in that uninformed optimism at the beginning of that emotional cycle. Yep, we're just going to do this and everything's going to be great and fine and dandy, and then I'm going to get to this point and it's going to be sweet as. But no, all this, it's messy, it's all crazy, it's all over the place. But every little thing will always give a forward movement. So it's really important to remember that. And please don't be afraid to engage in professional help. Um, through that emotional cycle, what will become evident will be those that childhood conditioning, those natural thought processes which are just automatic in your mind that might need tweaking and adjusting. There might be historical traumas that become evident that need to be explored and some sort of finding peace with, because these will no doubt be barriers that will stop you from really feeling that sense of success with your change. So don't be afraid to engage in professional help to explore and find peace with some of those historical traumas. And I really want to also say that historical trauma doesn't have to be big events in people's lives. They can be all those little small slights and those little small slights of hurt that your brother said, or your mother said, or that some child in the playground said, that you've held on to all these lies all this time. These are little things that need to also be explored that can be big barriers stopping you from moving forward. So get that professional help. And to finish off today, this is my favourite quote. I failed my way to success by Thomas Edison. He's the guy that invented the light bulb, among a whole raft of other amazing inventions. But he failed his way to success. And I think this is just really, really important. And yes, I have attempted so much change over my life, and I can see that all the times I have failed, I've always had one thing that I was able to change along my journey. Giving up smoking, giving up Milo, making changes in my movements each day. You know, there's always something I can go back and see as being, yeah, I haven't succeeded in the change that I had planned for, but I was able to take one small thing that I had managed to change forever. So, so that's been really good for me. And I'm still on that process of change. I'm still trying to get to my goal weight, but I am learning some fantastic, healthy practices in the meantime, which are becoming so much more natural to me now. So yeah, keep going, keep at it, and go well. Good luck. And if you have any questions and concerns, please do not hesitate to be in touch with your health and wellness facilitator. Have a good day.